So thank you again. Good morning, good afternoon, good early evening to some of you on the East Coast or elsewhere on the planet. My name is Andrea. I am a pleasure coach and sex educator based in Honolulu, Hawaii. So this is my morning class for you, and afternoon for the rest of you. So the high-level goals of our workshop today is to really help you understand what I would consider really an expanded view of sexuality. We have pretty limited offerings given to us in porn and rom-coms and in whatever goes for sex ed, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to kind of expand that definition and kind of blow it up. We're going to talk about sexual energy, the life force energy that's within you. We're going to talk about the embodiment, how to tap into that energy. And we're going to talk a little bit about arousal and desire. And then we're going to do 3 embodiment practices. And embodiment really means feeling into your body. We don't have a lot of opportunity to do this in our very busy, very distractible, kind of consumerist world. And so this is an opportunity for you to drop in and feel more. We're going to hang out today for an hour. If at any time you need to leave, please go ahead and drop off. You're welcome to reach out to me on email if you have any questions. I'll drop that into the chat in just a moment. And again, at any time, drop questions into the chat. I will do my best to keep that open. And I do have an agenda over here. I'm kind of an organizational nerd, so I'm going to be glancing over here every few moments, but let's get started. So one of the things I like to do at all of my events, virtual and in person, is to really build our container. And we're online. It's not necessarily a perfect solution, but all through COVID, we made the best of it. And so we're here, we're in this little virtual room, whatever physical room you are in. I want you just to feel your butt on the ground, feel your feet on the ground, and just feel where you are in space in this moment. And know that while you're in your physical space, we are also in this energetic and virtual space together. So I welcome you all here. Part of our container building is I would love to have you write into the chat your name and where you're from. I love to see where people are calling in from. This is actually my first event with Conscious City Guide, which is how most of you probably found me. And that feels really exciting to me. So if you want to tell me where you are, that would be amazing. I'd really appreciate it. And it's just helpful information. And also it lets me know who I'm talking to. The other thing I want to talk about in this room is confidentiality. So presumably none of you know each other. I don't know many of you yet. And yet we also want to agree that whatever comes up in our session today stays in our session today. We don't talk about anybody that we met. We don't talk about anything that we heard. And if you do happen to know someone who's here in the room, we also don't take it out of this room. And this is really important because a lot of the stuff that we talk about tends to be pretty personal when we get into groups, especially with groups of men, which I love holding space for. There's a lot of vulnerability that's required to be here. And sometimes that vulnerability is really scary. And always, it's super beautiful to watch. I think that it's very courageous for men who have grown up in this culture. And by this culture, I mean literally anywhere on the planet, which really limits men's expression. It limits the possibility of how you can speak and be and move and love in the world. And it's a really courageous act to be here and showing up for yourself and for each other and for the collective. So with that vulnerability, I do request and require confidentiality. The other thing we're going to do today is if we do any shares at the end, we'll have some time for some Q&A. So we really want to focus on I statements. So this would be a statement that sounds more like, I got stuck in traffic. I got so stressed out. It was so stressful for me because da, 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 and not when you do this and you do that and you do this, or you never, or you always. So we're going to try and avoid conversation like that, should that come up in our discussion. The other thing is, and this really comes from the kink community, is we're not going to yuck anyone's yum. So if anybody shares anything that's maybe new or interesting or different or something you've never tried before, sexually, emotionally, physically, we're not going to shame them for having those feelings. We're going to let everybody be exactly who they are. presuming there's no violence or any threats involved. And we're going to just celebrate them for where they are right now. So I also want to address something that comes up sometimes is what is a lady person doing, teaching about men's practices and men's work? And I have a couple of things to say about this. One is that I have a really unique perspective on what it's like being a female, moving through this world and dating men, working with men, living with men, having sex with men. That gives me a really unique perspective on what it's like. I'm never going to know what it's like to move through the world as a man, but what I can offer is a unique perspective as a person who loves men, as a person who's slept with men, who's had really great experiences and some also really terrible experiences with men. This gives me a really interesting perspective. I also learn from all sorts of different teachers of all genders to help inform my perspective and my learnings and bring what I know to you, to the community. So we have an hour together. So first, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about erotic energy and what that looks like. And then we're going to talk about some embodiment practices, like I mentioned earlier. And then we're going to have hopefully about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A and discussion. I'd love if you stick around for that. In case anybody, let me just drop something into the chat right now. If you have to drop off early or if something comes up and your connection goes missing, I'm going to drop my email into the chat. I'm also on Instagram at Vibrant Wellness. I had this all typed out, but that seems too hard to copy and paste over. And I literally just put my first TikTok up yesterday. And so now I am on TikTok. That's me. My website is just andreabertoli.com. Please reach out. I will send an email at the end, checking in with everyone, asking for feedback. I do love to hear what people have to say. Thank you to all the folks who dropped in. We have everywhere from Nantucket to Brooklyn to Tahoe to San Francisco and Los Angeles. So thank you everyone for being here. I appreciate it so much. So we're going to start. I'm going to take a sip of tea. So we're going to start talking about erotic energy, sexual energy. What is it? How do we cultivate it? What is a different way to look at this part of us? To me, sexual energy is really creative energy. It's get shit done energy. If you're a parent, it's parenting energy. It's literally the life force within which we can move through the world. Most often we cultivate this through sexual practices, whether that's playing with ourselves or playing with others. But sexual energy can be created in kind of non-stimulating ways to kind of bring that arousal into our bodies. And we'll be doing a little bit of that later with some of the embodiment practices. And today we're not actually focused specifically on sex. Like, I'm not here to tell you how to do what and when and to what body part to, make their brains explode and make their hearts open up and make their bodies do awesome things. That's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be focused more on the energetic levels. And as I said in the beginning, some of you were here, some of you have just joined. Welcome to everyone who's just joined. The energetics of sex is super potent and super beautiful. And it's so much more than just who's doing what to whom. It really looks at the feelings behind it, the intention behind it, the attention that we put on things, and the energy that we can cultivate together, whether that's you and yourself, you and a partner, you and a couple of people, depending on how you roll. And we're going to really focus today more on energy and sensation and not so much on orgasm. We are going to talk about that a little bit later when we get into our embodiment practices. We'll talk about the ejaculation delay and orgasm delay practices that people with penises can use to help expand pleasure. But for the most part, we're going to focus more on this body-based, sensation-based, energetic-based. So really understanding this kind of bigger picture of sex. My fabulous partner likes to say the big umbrella of sex or the big tent of sex, right? again, when I say sex, it's not necessarily just putting your body part in somebody else's body part. It's really the idea of when we connect with ourselves or with another person, kind of under this big tent of sex or sexual energy or shared experience, all of that can be sex. We've really acculturated to kind of fast food sex, or one of my favorite educators calls it junk food sex, which is we get in, we do the deed, we get out. Hopefully everybody has an orgasm, but we know from research that actually if you're a person with a vulva, most often you're not having an orgasm if you're having sex with people with penises. So unwinding the orgasm gap, unwinding how we do sex, this is all part of the work that we're going to talk about here today. The idea that we need to kind of get in, move fast, bang it out. I've had men tell me, oh, I just need to, sometimes you just need to bang one out and go to bed. And like, sure, like, great, like, absolutely. And if that's how you're training your body to expand and to feel your sexual energy, what happens when you get in bed with a partner and you want to last longer or you want to stay harder longer? Like, you may not be able to do it. So some of the practices we'll talk about today, we'll get into that. The other thing is that when we think of sex through this really narrow window of just putting one body part into another body part, we really lose the nuance. We really lose our capacity for I think we really lose our capacity for a deeper connection. And we focus instead on the outcome, that is an orgasm, instead of focusing on the pleasure, the sensation, the connection. And one of my other favorite sex educators, Emily Nagoski, really harps on this idea of pleasure is the measure. And when we explore sex from this capacity of, are we having beautiful sensations in our body? Are we having a lovely experience with ourselves or with this other person? When we take pleasure as the measure and not, did we do this? Did we do that? Did this thing happen? Is there an end goal? And did everybody reach that end goal? When we remove that end goal, we have an opportunity to really explore sex in a really different way. And this can be really fun for all bodies. And it's really super helpful for people with vulvas. The erectile tissue in a penis takes about 5 minutes to become fully aroused. And the erectile tissue in a vulva takes about 30 to 45 minutes. So if we think about kind of traditional sex and how we have how it's been shown to us, how it's been taught to us, perhaps how we've modeled it to our partners, to ourselves. Maybe we don't have another idea of what that looks like. That is a huge disservice, especially to people with vulvas, but to people with penises too. So I want to have a really quick discussion about porn, which is never a quick discussion, but I wanted, as I was working on the agenda yesterday, I really wanted to include this because this is something that comes up in a lot of conversation around men and sex. And I am not anti-porn. And when we take this bigger definition of sex and building sex as a measure of pleasure and as a measure of connection to ourselves, to our partners, porn can be kind of harmful to how we approach sex. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch it. I'm not saying you should never do it. But when we approach sex through porn, we're kind of overstimulating our brain and often overstimulating our bodies. And one of the ways to kind of decouple our, if you rely on porn often, one of the ways to decouple that, and this is some advice I got from another men's sexuality coach that I love working with, is really be a little bit more conscious about how you do it. Think beforehand about what it is that I want to watch. I definitely want to watch squirting. I definitely want to watch a threesome. Have an idea about what that is. Search for that one thing and watch the video. Don't play with yourself in the middle. Enjoy the experience of watching for what it is. Try and feel the arousal in your body before you move it through you. And be, it's TV or video or live, perhaps, if you're doing camming stuff, but be with the experience that it is. And then if you want to self-pleasure or masturbate, then move into it afterwards. Don't allow yourself to get sucked in. And, I've seen Pornhub. I know what that looks like, where there's flashy things here and flashy things here and more videos and more videos and more videos. And that continues to distance us from our bodies. So again, I'm not opposed to porn. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch it, but there's a way to approach it that can be a little bit more healthy and a little bit more of a sensual, pleasure-focused, sensation-focused experience. So all of this idea of what sex is, kind of rethinking what sex is, removing the goals, focusing on pleasure, learning how to tune into your body in a different way, perhaps either more consciously consuming or distancing yourself from kind of the high stimulation of that porn offers. All of these things are going to help make you a better lover. And when I say better lover, it kind of doesn't matter if you're single or partnered. We are our own best lovers, and we deserve to give ourselves the pleasure and attention and love that we all deserve. And if you don't have a partner right now, then this is an opportunity for you to tap into that really self-love, self-directed, self-pleasure practices and feel more of yourself, so that if and when you do meet up with someone, you'll have a different capacity within which you can love them. Some of the things that we focus on when we talk about more conscious sexuality or a deeper sexuality is the attunement. And I want to talk about attunement both to self and to other. So attunement with self kind of goes into this idea of having more sensation. Am I breathing too fast? Am I breathing too slow? Where is my breath in my body? Am I tight in my chest, or am I feeling relaxed in my belly? Where am I feeling any pain? If I'm thrusting, maybe I have a butt cramp, maybe I have a leg cramp. How do I tune into what's happening kind of on a moment to moment basis with myself, so that if any of you practice meditation or if you have a mindfulness practice, you know our minds are meant to wander and we get to bring it back. And this is a practice that I teach a lot of my clients, is really thinking about how we use the tools from mindfulness and meditation to refocus on our bodies, refocus on our breath, and refocus on our sensation, so that we can be really tuned in to exactly how we're feeling, and simultaneously tune in to what our partner or partners is feeling in that moment. Is their breath quickening? Is it slowing? Are they shifting in a way that they might indicate some discomfort? Are they really aroused? Can you tell if they are aroused? What is happening in their body that might indicate to you that they are comfortable, nervous, excited, whatever range of feeling they might be having? Learning to practice this attunement with your lover is going to go so far into becoming an amazing partner, because your partner is going to start to feel safer. Hopefully, they will start to open up once they notice that it's okay to adjust their leg or adjust their arm or take a break or whatever they might need. If you can offer space for attunement in your body, give them space in theirs, it will hopefully open up the dynamic between you for more openness, more trust, and deeper connection. This attunement starts, again, with your own body. It starts with your own sensation. And it also means that you need to have control of your sexual energy. And I've talked with a lot of men who have said that sexual energy, like in the example I gave earlier, is I just got to burn it off before bed, or I need to get rid of it, or it's something that's too much to handle and I want to move it out of me. When we take a step back and tune into the sensations in our body and tune into the pleasure, we realize that our bodies can hold a lot more pleasure. We can hold our arousal. And when we hold that sexual energy in our body, it is super powerful for yourself and for your partners. When I have had male partners who do not know how to control their sexual energy, it can feel at best kind of demanding or bossy, and at worst kind of unsafe. When I know that my partner has control over their sexual energy, I can start to relax. One of the things my partner says that's incredible is, this is my desire and it is not your responsibility. And even though we've been together for just a year, hearing that even within the year, is starting to unwind these decades of the unlearning of that responsibility, that like, if my partner has arousal in their body, that it is somehow my responsibility to do something with that. And hearing this from my partner and feeling his desire, feeling his energy has been so healing. And it allows me to relax into the pleasure because I feel like I don't have to perform for him, for me. We can just hold space for all the energy that exists within him. And I invite all of you to feel that in your body right now. Feel that sensation of what does that energy feel like when I am so aroused that I have to move it, I have to get rid of it, I have to orgasm, I have to do something. Try and feel that energy and imagine what else might be possible with it. Where else might you feel it? Where else might it move through your body? How might it feed you? And how might you share that energy with a partner in a way that is an invitation, perhaps, but not an obligation? When you learn to control your sexual energy, your sexual desire, that makes you a super powerful, super sexy lover, because I can trust that I get to be my full self and I'm not going to have to give in to your impulsive, kind of untrained energy, right? It also allows you to build the energy in you and share it. And when we start to think of sex and sexual energy as something that we can build within ourselves and also something that we can share with our partners, the juicier and deeper sex can be. And I also want to be clear, you noticed perhaps that I didn't say erection, because as you become more attuned with your sexual energy, you will also learn that your energy ebbs and flows just like the waves. And sometimes you'll have an erection and sometimes you'll lose it. And sometimes you'll have it and sometimes you'll lose it. And learning to accustom yourself to the ebbs and flows of your own desire is going to, again, be very helpful when you come into partnered sex and you want to be present for what is. I know for so many men, being in charge, performing, doing the thing, having a rock hard erection is what has been required of you, what has been expected of you as a lover, as a partner. And that's just not how bodies work all of the time. And especially as I get older, I realize my own body does things that sometimes I don't want to do. And some of that is an ebb and flow of sexual energy. Sometimes it's something totally different. The phrase that we use in our relationship is, it's just bodies being bodies. And this is something that I teach everybody that I work with, because there's so much pressure on your erection to be like the thing for sex, and it's just not fair. And I'm so sorry. So I work with the men to help them understand the natural ebbs and flows of their body and their arousal, which may or may not be in tandem with an erection, and also to help women understand that if their male partner loses an erection, it doesn't mean that they don't love you. It doesn't mean that they're not attracted to you. It's just bodies being bodies. Because I know that men have told me that when I lose my erection, my partner feels all sorts of feelings about this. Of course, because again, we are acculturated in the same way that says, in order for a male to be a good partner, they just have to have a hard on and they're always ready to go and they're always hard and they're always on. And that's just not true. It's such a limited scope of what men's sexuality can be. And again, I'm sorry. And I invite you to open up to the opportunities of what's possible when we let that expectation go. Learning to separate your erection from your arousal can be a really beautiful practice. And one of the ways we can do this is by one of the practices I'm going to teach later is a breathwork practice. And this will help you kind of cultivate that sexual energy where sometimes it feels exactly the same as kind of a genital stimulation orgasm. Sometimes it feels a little bit different. Sometimes it feels like nothing I've never experienced before. But when you start to experience a more energetic version of sex and sexual energy, your penis may or may not respond to that. And no problem. It's just information, right? The more information we have about how our arousal tracks with our erection, how our erections might ebb and flow, the better lovers we're going to be, because we're going to be able to be more kind to ourselves. Hopefully our partners will be understanding and loving and non-shaming as well. And we'll be able to feel more pleasure because we're not putting as much pressure on ourselves. Okay. One of the things I want to drop in before we move into the embodiment practices is the idea of when you own your sexual energy, it's going to feel like something. It's going to feel like you have power. It's going to feel like you have a charge in you. It's going to feel like you have a dragon inside you or a serpent or something like that. So whatever that might be for you, it's different for lots of different people. This is a powerful place to be in. When you are in control of your sexual energy, that's incredibly powerful. People will feel that. You will feel that in your own body, and your lovers will certainly notice that. And one of the things I always like to bring into the conversation around conscious sexuality is the idea of directive versus receptive energy. And those terms come from John Wineland, who's a men's sexuality coach. He's based in LA. If you're not familiar with him, please look him up. He's a wonderful resource. And I particularly like his use of the words directive versus receptive because it's a non-gendered term. Anybody can be directive, anybody can be receptive. It's about the type of energy that you yourself embody in any particular moment or scene or lifestyle. And the reason I like directive and receptive is because it helps us, I think, shift back and forth. Terms like, if you study conscious sexuality in Tantra or Taoism or any of the other ancient lineages, a lot, and modern teachers as well, they often use the terms masculine, feminine, yin and yang, Shiva, Shakti, sun and moon. All of those are helpful. And also those come with a lot of cultural baggage. And they also come with some gendered expectations. And so some teachers will talk about, yeah, we all contain masculine and feminine, and that is true. And yet, as we think about an expanded understanding of gender and gender expression, maybe those terms don't work for different people. And so I like directive and receptive because there's no gender attached to it. It allows us to feel both of those things within us. And we can think about examples of maybe when we've been more directive, maybe at work, maybe in bed, maybe when you're leading an event or something, and other times where we've been more receptive, where we're receiving a massage or receiving a blowjob or somebody's giving you a gift, whatever those ideas might be. I think it's a little bit easier to conceptualize using those kind of non-weighted, non-gendered, very non-specific terms. And so when I think about directive versus receptive energy, when it comes to sexual energy, you have the opportunity to play with that as well. As we think about expanding and increasing our sexual energy within ourselves, we get to decide if that's going to be a directive type of energy. Am I going to do a thing or perform in a way or, offer something, whether I'm going to offer some worship to my partner's body, or I'm going to offer them a pleasure session, or I'm going to offer them a guided breathing practice from my directive space? Or am I going to allow that energy to calm down and be in a more receptive mode? A lot of the men that I work with have a hard time receiving. A lot of people, men and women and everybody else, we're very good at giving. We're very acculturated to giving. It's better to be giving than to be receiving. We don't want to be too needy. We don't want to be too demanding, especially in bed. And it's hard for a lot of us to ask for what we want. So I love to encourage my male clients to really step into that role of owning their sexual energy and their power and using it in a directive way. And I also really encourage people to learn how to receive, how to lean back, how to hold your energy in a different way and be in that receptive space. And maybe that's somebody giving you a therapeutic massage. Maybe it's an erotic massage. Maybe somebody's doing some cock worship with you, or maybe there's some anal play where you are kind of forced to be receptive. Whatever it is that might look like in your sexual play, learning how to receive can be deeply healing for men. And I invite you all to explore that in whatever way that would feel comfortable for you. Okay. Okay, Jason, I saw your note from earlier. Please excuse me for missing it. He asked, would you be able to quickly remind us vagina versus vulva? So yes, we're going to be talking mostly about penises, but vulvas are part of this too. So vulva is all of the exterior. So everything that you see when you look at a person's body, and that is the labia, the outer labia, the inner labia, the clitoris, all of that is considered part of the vulva. The vagina is the actual part that goes inside. It is the tube that goes in where tampons go, where blood comes out, where penises and objects and fingers and all sorts of things go into. So I always use the term vulva to talk about our body parts. It's not a term that a lot of people use. And it is also the correct anatomical name for the things that lie between my legs. And the vagina is the interior part only. Does anybody have any other questions before we jump into the next section and for the practices? Please feel free to raise your hand or drop it into the chat. And if not, I will move on, and I will try and do better at reading the chat. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to move on to part 2, and we're going to do 3 short embodiment practices. And I say short only because literally each one of these could be their own class. And in fact, they are their own class that I teach here. Christopher asks, are directive and receptive the same as top and bottom? They can be. They could be different. So if anybody is in the kink scene or into BDSM, top is usually described as the person who is doing the thing or leading the scene, and the bottom is the person who is receiving. So directive could be the top, but there's also sometimes bottoms who are the director of the scene or of the activity, who could also be directive in their own way. So potentially interchangeable, but also potentially not. Dom and submissive is another one that comes from the kink world. And again, they come with some weight. They come with some connotations about what it means to be dominant, what it means to be submissive. And that's why I go back to using directive and receptive, because they don't come with as much weight. Whether you are a dom or a sub, or if you're interested in that type of play, go ahead and use those terms, absolutely. And again, thinking kind of bigger picture, what terms might be more applicable to more people at any given time. So that's why I choose directive and receptive. You are welcome. So for our embodiment practices, we're going to take about 10 minutes to do these, and I'm going to guide you through these practices. And again, these are practices. So maybe you feel something today, maybe you don't. One of my favorite Tantra teachers says, maybe this just isn't your practice. There's thousands of different ways to guide your breath. There's thousands of different ways to feel more into your body. Maybe these ones I teach you today will work for you. Maybe they won't. If they do, awesome. And if they don't, that's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And I would love to help you explore other ones. So we're going to do a kind of a sexy breathwork practice. And I have a longer version of this on my website, which I can send out to all the participants. And the one on my site is 12 minutes. We'll do just a couple of minutes for this one today. If you've never done breathwork before, that's okay. We'll start very easy and we'll do just a couple of minutes. So wherever you're sitting, maybe some of you are standing, I want you to get just as comfortable as possible. Maybe that's slouching back. Maybe that's sitting upright if you're sitting on the floor, just whatever feels super comfortable in your body. And then close your eyes and just notice your breathing. No need to change anything or do anything in this moment. Just be aware of whatever is right now. And just take a couple of slightly deeper breaths as we feel a little bit more into our body. Maybe feel into your heart space, feel into your belly, feel into your shoulders, You can move your head or your neck or your shoulders if you find that you're holding any tension there. And just think about the energy as water moving through you. So if water wanted to move through you, which it is constantly, but imagine the ocean is living within you and imagine it's moving through your body. Where might that energy need to go? Where might that water need to go to soften, to bring attention to bring tenderness to bring kindness to bring awareness to? And then I want you to put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly, just below your belly button. And I want you to start breathing more deeply into your heart. So, of course, we can't actually put air into our heart, but imagine that you can. Use a little bit of imagination, a little bit of daydreaming, and use this visualization to think, what would it feel like if my heart space was to expand just a little bit? And if you want, you can kind of move your torso forward and back. Sometimes that helps me feel a little bit more with the breathing, a little bit more into the space, and just breathe into your heart space. And what does that feel like? Does it feel soft? Does it feel tender? Does it feel guarded? Does it feel turned on? Does it feel nervous? Whatever you might be feeling. And keep your hand on your heart. Take one more really deep breath into your heart. And then we're going to drop our attention to our hand that's on our belly. We're going to breathe a little bit more deeply into our belly. We often hold a lot of tension here. We're all supposed to have six packs, and so few of us do. So allow your body, allow your belly to release just a little bit more than it was a minute ago. And see what that does to your breath. See what that does to your awareness. Take 2 of your deepest breaths yet during this session. And see how that feels between your heart and between your belly. And then I want you to visualize this energy moving further down into your pelvic floor or into your genitals. Whatever you've got down there is totally welcome. And we can all feel into our cock energy, whether we have a cock or not. So I want you to think about a grounding energy that centers you onto the floor, onto your seat, into your body. And again, we can't actually put physical air into there. So use your visualization. What would it look like if I breathed more into this space of my cock or my cock energy? What does it feel like if I bring my attention to my penis, to my testicles, to my perineum or your taint? What does it feel like if I breathe into this space, allowing for some expansion, maybe some sensation, maybe some arousal? Your arousal is welcome here. And imagine that that energy in your pelvic floor, in your genital space, starts to swirl and just kind of stays there like a little orb or like a tiny ocean that lives inside your pelvic floor, inside your cock space. And imagine that that keeps spinning faster and faster. Notice if your body is moving. Notice if your breath is changing. And I want you to really feel that energy and take 2 more super deep breaths into this cock energy. And then I want you to visualize that energy coming up into your belly, into your solar plexus, just below your sternum, into your heart space. Just notice what that awareness, what that visualization, what that breathing has done. Again, just notice what you're feeling. Are you feeling aroused? Are you feeling nervous? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling, et cetera, et cetera? Whatever you're feeling is welcome. And just feel that energy in your torso and feel that containment. Imagine you're zipping it up and containing it within your body. And then imagine it all releasing like a wave or like a spill or something exploding out of you. And maybe you feel it in your limbs, maybe you feel it in your head, maybe you feel it in your chest, and maybe shake or move or dance or swirl or whatever that might be to feel that energy actually spilling out of you. Hmm. When you're ready, if you're ready, come back into our little virtual room and just notice what you feel. I definitely feel a little bit more awake. I feel a little turned on. I feel really energized. I feel really excited. And maybe you feel the same. Maybe you feel something different. That's okay. So that's a mini version of a breathwork practice. And I am going to, so that involves a couple of different parts, right? So we're using both the breath as to kind of control our energy and also to contain it. So that's our first practice, is feeling that energy. The second is using the visualization. How can we envision this energy in our body? You can use a chakra-based system, which is the 7 different colors moving through your body. From the Taoist tradition, we have the microcosmic orbit or the flute. You can use the Kundalini imagery of the snake that's coiled at your spine, something totally different. I like to think of those swirls of color as it moves through me. Visualization is the second part of this. When we feel this energy in us, how can we then consciously move it? And we consciously move it using our breath and using our visualization. So those are our 2 first tools to use today. The second one, we're going to take just about 5 minutes to talk about this one, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, is an edging practice. This is a practice. Again, you may feel like this sounds like the worst idea in the entire world, because a lot of people do when I tell them this, but I promise it can be really helpful and really juicy and really fun. So one of the ways that I teach this to people with penises is using so let me back up 1 second. It's an arousal kind of training process that allows you to feel more of your arousal by learning how to edge yourself up to arousal and then back down, and edge yourself up and then back down. Edging can be used on any type of body. You can certainly edge if you have a vulva, but for penises, it's especially important because it helps people with penises have more awareness of what is happening in their body. And again, we talked in the beginning about the sexual energy and learning how to own that and learning how to contain that. That is part of it. The other part of it is like the actual physical practice with your body parts. And the way that we're going to do this is using a scale from 1 to 10. 1 is totally, boring, normal, neutral, not aroused, not turned on. 10 is you are going over the cliff, going over the waterfall, whatever metaphor it is for you. The sex educator in me would call it the orgasmic inevitability. And if you have a penis, I'm sure you know exactly what this feels like. It's the point of no return. And we want to experience all of the delicious things that are possible between 1 and 10. And so the next time you self-pleasure, this is definitely a practice that's done solo first before you bring it into your partnerships. But, I'm not the boss of you, so you do what you want. Start to feel your arousal. Notice whether it's at a 2 or a 5 or a 7. Some days you might jump up to a 7 or an 8 really quickly. Other days it might take you a little bit longer to get there. No problem either way. We're just learning, right? I want you to bring yourself up to what you think might be a 6 or a 7 or an 8, and then bring yourself back down. How do you bring yourself up is however you like to touch yourself, however you like to turn yourself on. And how you bring yourself down could be a couple of things. You can just stop and just go totally hands-free and say, I don't want to touch myself for the next 30 seconds or 1 minute. You can slow down. You can change the grip. You can change hands. You can try and do some breathing to move that energy. That's another way to kind of combine these practices. And then you start arousing yourself again. And maybe you go up to a 6 and down to a 2. And then maybe you go up to a 7 or an 8, and then you go down to a 5. There's no wrong way to do this. So if you're practicing and then suddenly, oops, I'm over the falls, no problem. It's a practice. No such thing as a bad orgasm, as one of my favorite teachers says. So we're learning how your penis responds. We're learning where your arousal numbers are. And you can start with 1 to 10. That's a helpful scale. It's not too much to remember. And you may, as you learn and grow in this practice, you may find that your numbers shift over time, right? Maybe what used to feel like a 5 now feels like an 8. And so you're learning to dial in these practices in a different way. One of my other favorite teachers talks about it as a staircase model, 1 being the bottom, 10 being you go up to the upstairs. She talks about widening the staircase. So it's not that you have to go from 1 to 2 and onwards, but you can go from 1 to 2 to 7 or 8. And then how do you stay at 7 or 8? How do you widen that staircase so that you can stay a little bit longer at those high states of arousal? And the way we learn to play with that is by doing this type of edging practice. Again, by yourself, with other people, however you want to play with it is totally welcome. And it's really helpful if you telegraph that to your partner. So if you are having sex with someone, tell them, I'm at an 8. Can we slow down? I'm at a 9. Please stop moving. Whatever that might be for you in that particular moment, whatever you need to kind of take off the heat is great. And again, hopefully your partner, if you have a partner, is game to play with you on this and help figure this out with you and has done their own work and doesn't take stuff personally, and maybe not. So we're going to practice it and we're going to just experience it. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about really pleasure being the measure of a lovely and connected and healing and joyful sexual experience. Maybe you never actually reach that point of orgasmic inevitability, because kind of the next level of an edging practice is really learning how to withhold. And ejaculation withhold is something that the tantrikas and the Taoists really focus on a lot. I don't focus on it as much because the sex educator in me also knows that it's really good to exercise the prostate and make sure that we're having regular ejaculation. So I kind of blend these two things, right? Yes, it's good to practice and learn how to ejaculation withhold. And yes, it's also super fun to have an ejaculatory orgasm. I'm kind of in the middle of these two things. The other thing is that when you learn to practice the edging, when you include the visualizations and the breath, this is how you learn to have orgasms without ejaculation. This is also possible. They are two separate physiological responses in our body, but whenever you started masturbating or touching yourself as a very young person, these became fused. And it's very hard for a lot of people to understand that they are separate things, but they are. And as you practice more and more of the energetic components of it, you will start to touch on and experience some of the energetic components of it, which can be just as satisfying as an ejaculatory orgasm. And maybe it's not as satisfying, but it's different. And again, it's something to practice with. It's something to play with. It's something else to add to your repertoire of pleasure. So no specific goals other than practice, experimentation, feeling more sensation, feeling more into your body, and learning to be a better lover, both to yourself and to your partners.